On April 8, 2003, Major Jim Ewald is flying low over Iraq, providing close air support to American troops fighting their way toward Baghdad International Airport. As Major Ewald rolls out of a low-altitude gun run, Iraqi forces fire a surface-to-air missile directly into the rear of his aircraft. The explosion cripples the Warthog almost instantly, but Ewald fights hard to stay in the air because the ground below him is swarming with enemy fighters. So he pulls the aircraft in the direction of the nearest American forces and fights to maintain control as long as possible. Miraculously, he manages to put some distance between him and the enemy, but he doesn't quite make it to the Americans before his right engine fails completely, causing the aircraft to spiral violently to the right, forcing him to eject over hostile territory. Ewald's parachute deploys instantly and he tumbles through the sky as he watches his crippled A-10 Warthog slam into the ground, sending a massive cloud of smoke into the sky. All around him, just out of sight, the battle for Baghdad is raging. American armored columns are pushing toward the airport from the west, while scattered Iraqi forces continue launching from neighborhoods, alleyways, and industrial districts surrounding the city. Ewald takes a second to look around the field, taking in his surroundings. He can hear distant gunfire, and he knows everyone within a 10-mile radius can see the dark cloud of smoke rising from the crash site. Within minutes, another A-10 Warthog rolls aggressively toward the area at low altitude. The pilot wastes no time. As reports begin coming in about enemy movement near the downed pilot's position, the Warthog immediately starts making repeated gun runs across the surrounding roads and open terrain. The massive Gal-weight Avenger cannon tears across the ground with its unmistakable growl. 30mm rounds rip through the dirt roads, abandoned vehicles, and suspected enemy positions as the A-10 attempts to keep Iraqi fighters away from Ewald long enough for rescue forces to arrive. But even with the American aircraft overhead, the situation is rapidly becoming more dangerous. Baghdad is still crawling with armed Iraqi troops and anti-aircraft crews. The longer the second A-10 stays overhead, the higher the chances of another downed aircraft. Inside coalition command vehicles and airborne control aircraft, radios overlap almost non-stop. Pilots relay coordinates, ground forces report possible enemy movement. Every transmission carries the same urgency. The A-10 covering Ewald continues hammering the area with repeated strafing runs. Each pass comes in dangerously low. The pilot scans roads, tree lines, irrigation ditches, and abandoned structures, searching for any sign of movement near Ewald's last known location. Then suddenly, muzzle flashes erupt from the ground. Iraqi fighters open fire toward the aircraft from multiple positions near the outskirts of the city. Tracer rounds streak upward through the sky as the A-10 Warthog violently banks away before immediately rolling back in for another attack. Seconds later, the Gal-weight cannon unleashes another burst. The ground below disappears in explosions, dust, and shredded debris. The goal now isn't to destroy a major military target, it's to buy time. Every gun run is designed to keep Iraqi fighters pinned down long enough for rescue forces to reach the pilot. Meanwhile, on the ground, Ewald continues moving through open terrain trying to avoid detection. The hardest part is not knowing where the enemy is. Every distant gunshot sounds close. Every vehicle in the distance could be Iraqi fighters searching for him, and unlike a normal infantry soldier, Ewald has almost no ability to defend himself if a larger enemy force finds him first. But in the distance, he can hear it. The unmistakable roar of an A-10 Warthog diving low overhead. Ewald knows American aircraft are still above him, and that's enough to keep him going. But the sound is both reassuring and terrifying because if coalition aircraft are firing this aggressively near his location, it means enemy fighters are already getting dangerously close. Major Ewald manages to find a good hiding spot in a thick tree line nearby. He wedges himself up against the base of a tree with low-hanging thick branches concealing him inside. But Iraqi forces outside the city are now now aggressively pushing through the open terrain, trying to reach the downed plane. And overhead, the lone A-10 covering Ewald is running out of time. His fuel is becoming a concern and ammunition is dropping fast, but the pilot continues making repeated attack runs anyway. But suddenly, Ewald's worst nightmare comes true. He can hear truck engines approaching from the east. He knows a search and rescue crew would almost certainly reach him via helicopter, not ground vehicles. The enemy has found him. If you want to see the uncensored footage from this video that was too graphic for YouTube, our Patreon page currently has a whopping 90% off sale, so now is the perfect time to join and access our full library of uncensored footage. He pushes himself closer up against the base of the tree and begins covering himself with dirt, leaves, and fallen branches, anything to conceal his location from the approaching vehicles. The vehicles continue getting closer. Dust trails behind them as they move aggressively across the open ground towards his position. The thick tree line Ewald is hiding in is positioned directly between the approaching enemy vehicles and his downed aircraft. He realizes in order to reach the crash site, the enemy will have to dismount their vehicles and move on foot directly through his hiding spot. Suddenly, the vehicles come to a stop just outside of the tree line. Ewald prepares himself for the worst outcome, but then suddenly, he hears a thick country American accent come from the trucks. "Hey pilot dude, come on out, we're Americans." Ewald later reported that there was no mistaking that accent. It sounded like your typical 19-year-old American from the South. It was the U.S. Army's 54th Engineer Battalion. They had witnessed the ejection earlier and immediately moved toward the downed pilot's location before Iraqi fighters could get there. The rescue force reached Ewald just as the situation around them began collapsing. More enemy fire erupted nearby. Tracer rounds shrieked across from the outskirts of Baghdad as Iraqi fighters attempted to close in on the area. Almost immediately, the A-10 overhead rolls back into another attack run. This one comes in even lower than before. The Warthog screams across the battlefield only a short distance from the friendly forces before unleashing another burst from the Gal-8 Avenger cannon. The massive stream of 30mm rounds tears through the enemy's position dangerously close to the rescue convoy. Explosions rip across the field. Dirt and debris blasts into the air. The gun run is so close that American soldiers on the ground can physically feel the shockwaves from the impacts, but it works. The strafing pass forces Iraqi fighters to break contact long enough for the rescue team to load Ewald into the vehicle. The convoy immediately turns back toward coalition lines as the A-10 continues circling aggressively overhead, guarding their withdrawal. Even after the rescue vehicles begin pulling away, the Warthog keeps attacking. Again and again, the aircraft dives toward the battlefield, firing near suspected enemy positions to prevent Iraqi forces from regrouping and pursuing the convoy. Only now, with the rescue force finally moving away from Baghdad, does the full reality of the situation begin to set in. Major Jim Ewald had just survived being shot down over one of the most dangerous cities on Earth, and he escaped only minutes before Iraqi forces closed in on his position. Baghdad was by far the most dangerous place for an A-10 Warthog to be. In fact, less than 24 hours earlier, another American Warthog had barely survived a catastrophic hit over the exact same location. But unlike Major Ewald's situation, this pilot somehow managed to keep their crippled aircraft in the air long enough to attempt something almost no pilot had ever successfully done in combat. On the morning of April 7th, Campbell received her tasking: provide overhead support for advancing U.S. forces south of the Tigris River. It looked like any other standard operation: launch, orbit, respond to calls, but those coordinates, those buildings, would place her squarely in the crosshairs of one of Baghdad's most fortified zones, making this without question the most dangerous mission of her extensive career. The desert sun rose over Al Jaber Air Base in Kuwait, bathing rows of camouflaged A-10s in a dusty gold. It was April 7th, 2003, Inside hardened shelters, crews prepped for a day of missions over Baghdad. For Captain Campbell, it would be her 21st combat mission since the start of Operation Iraqi Freedom. It started like any other mission. Campbell reviewed the tasking, loaded the coordinates, and went through the pre-flight. Everything felt routine until it wasn't. While Campbell and her wingman were still en route to a holding point, an urgent request came through. A troops in contact alert had been issued by ground units from the 3rd Infantry Division. They were taking intense fire from entrenched Republic Guard forces in southern Baghdad. The JTAC came over a radio with an urgent tone. Any hog flight on station, this is chaos actual. We are under fire. Multiple RPGs. We need air on target now. Without hesitation, the two A-10s changed course and pushed north toward Baghdad's urban sprawl, where enemy forces had dug in among homes, buildings, and factories. As they approached Baghdad, the environment grew increasingly dangerous. The city's southern sectors were saturated with anti-aircraft artillery, man-portable air defense systems, and mobile SA-7 and SA-14 SAMs. The skies were hostile. Flying in Baghdad was a completely different kind of mission. The A-10s weren't high-flying strike aircraft dropping JDAMs from high altitude. They were down low, right in the thick of the action, and well within range of enemy anti-air weapons. On the ground, the 3rd Infantry Division had become bogged down near an overpass just south of the Tigris River. Bradley IFVs and M1A1 Abrams tanks were advancing through narrow streets when enemy fire erupted from a cluster of warehouses and walled compounds. The JTAC radioed in once again. Be advised, we are danger close. Enemy firing from a rooftop 200 meters from friendlies, marking with smoke now. Stand by. The JTAC on the ground popped red smoke, trying to mark enemy positions, but winds shifted and the smoke was quickly distorted, making visual confirmation tricky. Campbell's wingman rolled in first, strafing the target buildings with a quick burst. Campbell followed closely behind. She dived from 6,000 feet and lined up her Avenger cannon on the target, a rectangular rooftop with multiple hostiles on top. At just under 1,500 feet, she squeezed the trigger. The 30mm rounds tore through not only the enemy fighters, but also the concrete, collapsing parts of the structure. But the enemy wasn't done yet. RPG fire lit up from another direction. Campbell climbed out and circled for a second run. The enemy had split into smaller teams, moving through alleyways, using civilians as shields, and firing from balconies. A second RPG impacted near a US M113 APC, disabling it. The ground troops were now pinned. As the fight dragged on, Campbell's A-10 had already fired 2 full passes. She was starting her third when things began to feel off. The winds had picked up, dust and smoke reduced visibility. The enemy was adapting, shifting firing positions. The radio crackled with a new report. A possible anti-air team was spotted moving near the highway underpass. But the Warthogs had to keep up the pressure. The troops on the ground had nowhere to go, but the Warthogs knew that every run increased their chances of being hit. Regardless, Campbell began her 4th strafing run, this time from a slightly deeper angle, designed to reach deeper into an enemy compound partially hidden behind a factory wall. She armed the gun, called in hot, and began firing. She could hear the power of the Avenger cannon shake the entire aircraft, and then she could see clear impact on target. But just as she started to pull up, a missile slammed into the rear of her aircraft, striking near the vertical stabilizer. The jet rocked violently. Caution lights illuminated across the cockpit. The hydraulic systems failed instantly. The stick became sluggish and the nose dipped. It felt like someone had punched the airplane out of the sky. Campbell grabbed the controls. Nothing responded. The panel lit up like a Christmas tree. An enemy surface-to-air missile had hit her right tail section, shattering hydraulic lines and jamming control surfaces. The jet immediately became unresponsive. Most pilots in this situation would eject, but the A-10 is just built differently, and so is this pilot. Campbell flipped the emergency switch, engaging a backup system called manual reversion. It uses steel cables to move the control surfaces without hydraulic pressure. It feels like trying to fly with a 2-ton weight on the wings. Every movement took massive physical effort. Campbell's wingman quickly called in support and stayed close. Campbell began the long flight back to base 70 miles south. Every minute in the air was a gamble. The aircraft had lost its tail controls, one engine was failing, and fuel was leaking rapidly. But Campbell kept flying. As Campbell approached the airfield, she knew there would only be one chance to land. The A-10 was barely controllable, especially at low speeds. She came in higher and faster than normal, not knowing if the gear would hold or if the aircraft would roll off the runway. She touched down hard, bouncing once, but stayed upright. The entire right side of her tail was shredded. Holes riddled the fuselage, and the aircraft looked like it had been chewed by giants. But miraculously, Campbell was unharmed. For her actions that day, Captain Kim Campbell was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for heroism and extraordinary achievement in aerial flight. And her story became a case study in courage, aircraft survivability, and pilot skill. She later reflected that staying calm under fire wasn't about being fearless, it was about trusting her training, her aircraft, and her team. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall back on your training. Today, now Colonel Kim Campbell is a speaker, author, and example of leadership under pressure. And her A-10, battered but unbroken, is still a symbol of the A-10 Warthog's resilience. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua 1 verse 9. If you're distant from the Lord today, this is for you. God has brought you to the very end of my long-winded video to call you closer to Him. Take some time today to meet Him in prayer and read His Word. Psalms 34 verse 8 says, "Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in Him." If you've tried everything else but still don't have peace and still feel that sense of emptiness inside, today is the day to try Jesus.